Welcome, stargazers. Today I have Christina Caudill. Did I pronounce it right, Caudill? Okay.
Yes.
Christina is an amazing astrologer. I'm sure many of you have heard of her, and she works with Radiant Astrology. And I had a reading from her, and it really blew me away. And so I wanted to have her on. She's going to be teaching a class about the nodes, and I thought, let's talk about that and let's, get people warmed up and so they can sign up for your class. So if you have never joined me before, this is the Lawless Astrology channel, and here we talk about how astrology can help us find the best path to our happiest life, whether we have issues with relationships or career, any kind of difficult times. We want to look at what is your highest path. And so, welcome, Christina.
Great, Dabney. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. I so appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, so we're going to talk today about the nodes of the moon, the North Node and the South Node. And you are an evolutionary astrologer. I'm an evolutionary astrologer. I think we probably have some overlap in our teachers. But do you want to talk a little bit about your background and what an evolutionary astrologer is?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm Christina Caudill with Radiant Astrology, and I studied evolutionary astrology because that really gave me an entry into astrology from the standpoint of something that could be helpful for me in my life, like what direction should I be going in? Because I felt like most of my life, I just kind of did what was in front of me, or took advantage of, what was being offered to me. And I didn't feel like I was really making the most, decisions for my life that came from the highest place. And I started studying with Mark Jones from the UK, who is not only an evolutionary astrologer, but also a psychosynthesis therapist, which I from what I know, psychosynthesis is it's some kind of soul-based therapy, right? So I find that using astrology from the point of view of how it can help people, how it can be therapeutic, how it can be empowering, how it can be a basically a pathway to understanding the self more deeply. That to me is the best use of astrology. Now, astrology can be used for many things, for as an oracle, for divination, for, magic, things like that. But evolutionary astrology really believes that the soul has an intention and has specific things that it needs to express in this lifetime. And when we're misaligned from what the soul's intentions are, that's when we can really feel misaligned in life. And even some of the more difficult things that we experience, that can be coming from the soul. Perhaps the soul felt that there was something that it needed for a sense of wholeness, to live. And I was just recently re-listening to The Seat of the Soul by Gary Zukav. I don't know if you remember that one
I do.
from.
I actually read that when I was a teenager before I found astrology.
Yeah, and a therapist had recommended it to me. And even though some of it feels a little out of date, some of it, I would say most of it, is so right on. And he talks about how karma is something like, we tend to see karma as, like good and bad. And if I do something bad, I'll be punished later. Or if I do something good, I'll receive rewards. And he kind of looks at it more in sort of an energy exchange that, yes, there could be some things that, when we express something destructive, that at some point the soul needs to rebalance and experience that same level of energy, and that it's not really appropriate for us to judge that. It's simply, the nature of the universe. And I feel also that, with evolutionary astrology, we also try to take a non-judgmental view. It's not that, say if I have the North Node on the ascendant and the South Node and the descendant. I know Stephen Forrest had said, it's not that you're not meant to be in a relationship or be married. It's just that where the South Node is, that energy has really served its most potent purpose in the previous lifetime or in a past lifetime. That where the growth is, where we stretch ourselves, and it can even be uncomfortable growth, but it's something that the soul is saying is needed in this lifetime, we tend to find more through the North Node expression. And evolutionary astrology is, it's more than the lunar nodes, but the lunar nodes are certainly a very important part of that picture because ultimately they are sort of the compass of, where the soul really wants us to be moving toward.
Yeah, so I studied with Stephen, and I love what you just that your description is fantastic. I think we bring a lot of gifts with us from the South Node because it's something that we've done already, and so we have to stretch ourselves into the North Node, and it might be territory we don't feel comfortable in. And he always kind of says that it's like a rubber band that if you're not constantly pulling on it and stretching yourself toward that North Node, you let go and it snaps back. And there's something that you can always be bringing to the table when it comes to your South Node, but that's the easy thing. Like that's the easy work. Like you've already got that down. And so also, I kind of believe, and my own personal experience was that karma is a loop, right? It's really easy to do the same things over and over again because it's what you know. And so, again, with that sort of rubber band metaphor, it's like you have to stretch yourself to get out of that loop. How do you get off of the merry-go-round of constantly being in a bad relationship? Or how do you get off of the merry-go-round of, being a workaholic? There are people like they have these sort of patterns and they really don't know what they're doing wrong. And I've experienced with my clients that once you sort of give them that map or the keys to their North and South Node, it's really kind of this aha moment where they're like, wow, it's almost like you can throw away the rest of the chart. The rest of the chart has so much to do with your personality, but the North and the South Node is, I love in your class what you're entitling it. Like, what is it? Your soul's GPS? Is that what you
Well,
called it?
the free webinar I did was your GPS to destiny, but yeah,
Okay.
that's part of the course.
Okay. So, all right. So, do you want to just talk a little bit? I actually listened to her awesome free webinar. I don't know if it's still available, but it was kind of like here's what I'm going to be teaching. And so I was like, well, I'd love to hear a little bit more about this. And she had the best description of what the nodes of the moon are that I've ever heard from any other astrologer. So would you mind explaining to us what the nodes of the moon are? Because they're not planets, they're not asteroids. They are parts of our chart, but like how would we know where to find them and
Absolutely.
enlighten us?
Well, if you, I think most people who maybe are fairly new to astrology may be using something like astro.com, which is a free chart software, which can, if you know your birth time and the or birth date and time and place, can just have a chart within seconds. And you don't necessarily have to have the exact time to know the nodes. That's the good, that is the good news. Although to know the houses that they're in, you do need to know the time. But when you cast your chart on a free software like that, often it shows just the North Node. I know astro.com only shows a North Node. I think some other ones might just show the North Node. I don't know why they do that. They should show
I
both
think
the North
same
and the
with like
South.
Starcaster and stuff like that. It's just the North Node or not even the nodes. So yeah, sometimes
Okay.
it's a little harder to find them.
So it's important to know that for the nodes of the moon, okay, the lunar nodes are exactly opposite. So, for instance, I have Scorpio, North Node in Scorpio, 21 Scorpio. So my South Node is at 21 Taurus. So it's pretty, and I think those of us that know charts like that, we can already kind of see it, even if it's not printed there, because we know exactly what's opposite. But what I think is really so such a great contribution to astrology and evolutionary astrology was that the emphasis that some of our great teachers like Stephen Forrest has put on how important it is to really delve into the South Node also, because that I like to think of as our origin story. As you'd said, that there's gifts there and it may be like our comfort zone or things that come easy to us. But from an evolutionary standpoint, we may feel stuck or we may feel like we're not progressing. And that has so much to do with what the lunar nodes symbolize. So I think, Dabney, what you were referring to in my talk was when I was taking from Dana Ridjar's teachings on the lunar nodes and how that pathway that the moon has, the monthly moon orbit around the Earth acts sort of like a womb for the earth. And it has a lot to do with our biological growth and emotional growth and maturity. And even when you think of, in the olden days, they did a lot of the, farming and things like that by the moon, because there's that sort of waxing and waning energy that has to do with growth, actual like fertilization and growth biologically on the planet. And so when that pathway intersects with what we call the ecliptic, which is the sun's apparent pathway around the earth, from our point of view, it looks like the sun is revolving around us. There's these 2 points, and those represent the north node and the south node. There's the ascending point of the moon and the descending. But basically, we know that these are points of alignment of the sun and the moon. The sun being our conscious identity, consciousness, it's symbolizing consciousness and our conscious focus in this lifetime. That's why, sun sign astrology, it is actually important. There's a lot we can glean from our sun sign, but, we know there's so much more to us than just that. And then the moon having to do with our inner self, our sense of satisfaction, our emotional satisfaction, what we crave emotionally, our emotional needs. When those intersect, for somehow, I don't know how it works, but it works, that there is a sense of cosmic alignment. And it's even more emphasized every 6 months when we have the eclipse seasons, a solar eclipse being a new moon conjunct one of the lunar nodes, and a lunar eclipse being a full moon conjunct the lunar nodes. So, and during times of eclipses, we can tend to really sense that things change so intensely usually. And oftentimes that's because there's something out of alignment that gets realigned. And it's like an interruption in our sense of, what we're used to every day. But it's really about our luminaries, the sun and the moon, coming together in this these points of alignment. And so it's also important to remember that all of the planets have nodes. And they don't all, align exactly like, opposite or whatever because of the different orbital periods. But the moon, the lunar nodes have to do with the moon. So we can go really far into what do the lunar nodes mean, but we want to always come back to the moon, and the moon symbolizing, like a baby in its mother's womb, being dependent on the mother, being infantile, and ultimately growing into our own being biologically, emotionally, and from a mature standpoint. And that somehow, because we are, soul beings having an earthly expression, that can also have to do with the path of our soul and what our soul wants to grow into. I think that the lunar nodes now have been so beautifully developed from, the work from, Vedic astrologers, thousands of years ago, actually, really first started really looking at the lunar nodes in terms of how they can be, dangerous to our spiritual development if we are only looking at them in terms of material gain, right? Because there is something to do with material gain with the North Node. And so in the Vedic view, both of them are malefic, basically. But in the Western view, we kind of understand the value of materialism, but we can also be too hungry, like the Vedics say that the North Node, Rahu, is the dragon's head that's constantly hungry, hungry, hungry for more. And I think it's important to also understand that too, that when we're so hungry for more and we're not ever satisfied, then that itself can be problematic too. And the South Node is like the dragon's tail, so it's that excrement, right? But I believe, I can't remember what astrologer had said, that excrement can also be the fertilization for that which needs to ultimately help us grow. And
Yeah.
so Yeah, it's
Yeah,
I
so as like Western evolutionary astrologers that were, we look to the work of, Stephen Forrest and Jeffrey Wolf Green and some other people that have really done a tremendous amount of research and have kind of, somewhat of a different take on it. But I do think there's real value to that sort of the dragon head and dragon tail and kind of understanding that each, individual story is so unique. That's what I love about the nodes. So one thing that I just want to add, when you look at your chart, if you go to astro.com or something like that, it looks like a horseshoe or an upside down horseshoe. So that's kind of what you're looking for the north and the south node. So I was always taught that, a horseshoe upside down was good luck. And it never made sense to me that that is the upside down is the south node and the horseshoe turned down is the north node. So you kind of can look at it that way. That's how I always thought of it when I first learned. But talk a little bit about, how it is so individual, because I know that when I learned about it, it's not only just what sign and house it's in, but it's also the rulership. And so really the shorthand of modern day evolutionary astrology with the nodes, it is all about your karma and your soul's destiny and how you can release that which no longer serves you. But how do you approach it? Do you look at the rulerships, or do you just look at like the house and sign? You want to talk a little bit about?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first thing is looking at the nodes, and it's so funny that I've had recently a lot of people asking me things like, "What's more important, the sign the nodes are in, or the house?" And when you read, and there's some really good books out there. Again, Stephen Forrest, Yesterday's Sky is great. Writings from Jeffrey Wolf Green. Also, there's that one by Jan Spiller on the soul.
That's my Bible. I love that
What's
one
it
when I
called
do a
again? The
read.
souls. I forget, but she it's
I'll put
basically,
a link to like all of these books because
yeah.
they're all really important.
Although I will say that Jan Spiller, I love it. However, hers seems to be very much like South Node bad, North Node good, and it's very much in black and white, which can be helpful when you're first learning. But as you said, the South Node has gifts. And there's times when, as I was talking about the dragon's head, where we can reach for that North Node, and maybe we're not ready. Maybe we're not ripe enough, or mature enough to really live into that North Node. So we can go into the South Node where, our psyche feels a little more comfortable. Maybe we can find our balance again, our bearings again, before we can grow, in another sort of iteration. And so yeah, that's why I tend to recommend either Stephen Forrest's book or Mark Jones' Healing the Soul or The Soul Speaks. I always get those two confused, but one of them has to do with the
Is
lunar.
astrology for the soul, and I think you're
Yes.
right. I think it's really good for a beginner in the sense that it's very cookbook. So
Mhm.
like if you know your north node is in the sixth house in Capricorn, you can read those two chapters and you'll get a lot out of it and you'll probably recognize yourself. But as you get more advanced, like you said, looking at the rulership and the aspects and, the bigger picture, the philosophy behind karma, it's such a rich place to kind of mine the information. So I'm going
Mhm.
to put a link to like all these books, and I'll have to look up
Yeah.
your other teacher from the UK. I have not studied with
Oh,
him.
okay. I'll have to let me see. I think I've got his book here somewhere. I'll have to find it for you. But oh, here it is. Mark Jones, Healing the Soul, Pluto, Uranus, and the Lunar Nodes.
Right.
And so this one, and again, it's written from the point of view of someone who is there to help someone live their life, heal themselves emotionally, understand themselves, give them maybe a little bit of what they need in a sort of a therapeutic type of session, which I think is really important for anyone who's doing any kind of counseling astrology. Maybe that's not your full, purpose. Maybe you want to help people in other ways, because astrology can be used for so many things. But when we can understand what people are seeking when they unconsciously, when they come to an astrology reading, then it can be really helpful to understand that from sort of a depth psychological perspective. But what I was trying to say when I was saying about, do you look at the sign or the house? Because when you look at a lot of these books, you look it up versus sign and house, right? Because they usually have the cookbook sort of format. I think they're both important, but it's important to understand the differences. The sign isn't going to change depending on your house system. Okay, so that's something to understand, because there's so many, different house systems out there. And for some people, not everyone, but for some people, their chart can really change a lot when you use a different house system. I like to use, as Jeffrey Wolf Green had recommended, using the Koch house system for evolutionary astrology, and it has to do with sort of like the evenness that the houses are split. I'm not very eloquent at this, but that has to do with something about like the phases of the soul, or the soul's journey. But I also like to use whole sign. So that gives me additional information. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. I think we need additional information because we can layer on these themes. And there aren't, like there aren't walls in the sky walling off, the experiences in life, right? So I feel like it's important to understand when we look at houses, we're looking at the area of life that these things can tend to, can give us a clue what area of life that we may see more of this expression in. When we look at the sign, then from an archetypal perspective, then it shows us sort of the nature of how this is expressed. And I feel like archetypes are so important. Like, for instance, I have North Node, as I said, in Scorpio, and it's either in the 10th house in one house system or it's in the 11th house. But I like to layer those. For me, my career ambitions have a lot to do with how I feel I'm contributing to society, or how I engage with groups, or audiences and things like that, which is very 11th house. So to me, they do intersect. But the nature of it is very scorpionic. My South Node in Taurus, seeks stability, and also often I go back into scarcity mindset and things like that. But I feel like when I'm really aligned and I'm really feeling a lot more empowered and authentic, it's very scorpionic. I'll go into those dark places. I'll go into the occult. I want to like look into the depths. I want to, feel like I can be determined and empowered, even if, I feel like I have, other people trying to like pull me back or whatever, or in any of those like difficult experiences where you're challenged either by other people or by yourself. It's very scorpionic in nature. So they're both important. It's just important to understand the difference, because for, just sort of conciseness, a lot of these books, they kind of put them together. You're like, Scorpio 8th house, which I can kind of understand because, they're archetypally similar. So I would say they're both important, but just understand the difference between, house system is where in life things tend to show up, and the zodiac sign is sort of the archetype, the nature of that expression, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope you take this as a compliment, because when I first asked you to join, I wanted you to maybe look at something Plutonian and something very Pluto. And that is sort of how I identified you, as kind of a sort of more deep astrologer, more like of a depth psychology astrologer. And I know you through your ancestral work in astrology with another really great astrologer, Fern. So it's one of those things that I think you're doing your North Node. And so when you're doing your North Node, I think you radiate something that is attractive to other people. I think that people are drawn to people that are in their North Node. My North Node axis is the Gemini Sagittarius. So
Oh,
I'm constantly worrying. I'm constantly in my head, but I'm also good at like processing data and processing information and do multitasking, right? So there's the like, you can bring gifts to the table, but I have had a 25 your career in public relations, which is incredibly like Gemini South Node, and it's in the sixth house. So there it's like servicing other people, disseminating information. But ultimately, when I'm happiest, I am giving people advice. I am doing astrology readings. I'm having faith in the universe. And so I think people are attracted to you when you are doing your North Node. And like you said, like with Taurus South Node, it's easy for you to slip into that scarcity mindset, or like, feeling overwhelmed, or like, you just need everyone to back away instead of diving in deep with them, which is really ultimately what your soul is trying to accomplish here.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way of expressing that. And I can totally see. So you said South Node, Gemini in the sixth. Is that
Yeah.
you? And
Yeah.
then North Node, Sagittarius as well. So are you Capricorn rising?
I'm actually 28, or very end of Sag rising.
Okay.
So,
I'm Cap rising too. So I was like, we
yeah.
have a lot to look forward to with Jupiter coming into our sixth house, but that's a
Yes.
whole thing.
Yeah, no, it's already happening, but yeah. But we know how to work hard with that big Capricorn first house. So,
Mhm.
yeah. So, let's talk a little bit about your upcoming course, and like what are the things that people can learn about the nodes, because this is just like, if you're interested in learning more about your North Node or your South Node, I mean, really think of it as a cheat sheet or cliff notes to what your soul is here to do. I mean, the most important thing in a chart to an evolutionary astrologer, besides Pluto, I think is the nodes of the moon. And so looking at what, if you're looking for a map or a guidepost, if you're feeling lost at all, the nodes are really the most important thing to explore. So tell us a little bit more about, like, because we could talk about the nodes you're going to be talking about it for several weeks.
Yeah, well, I thought that, one of the most sort of healing and empowering thing is when we can write our own destiny, write the story of our destiny. And to me, if we can have a sense, and it doesn't even have to be like a novel, right? But even just like a little essay on our own sort of evolutionary journey, where the South Node is our origin story, right? And the North Node is more of our future potential. And then what connects them, the evolutionary axis, we call it, is, I've come up with the term the evolutionary adventure. And so what does that look like? And through this 6-week course, we'll be developing that, bit by bit. And then hopefully in the end, we'll have something to synthesize. And I've done this in the past for some people who, some people prefer to write a poem, some people prefer to draw a picture or something like that. Or write a story, a whole mythology around it. Because if life is more of sort of that mythology, where, we can identify the archetypes that we're playing, then we also don't have to feel like, what was it I heard recently? Like, life isn't meant to be an obstacle course. It's meant to be sort of an adventure, right? It's not like there's all these obstacles we need to get out of our way and protect ourselves from and beat down or whatever. It's more like, an exciting adventure, and we can be more curious about it and move forward with that. So we'll look at the lunar nodes, the nodal axis. As you mentioned before, the rulers of the nodes are also really important. And a lot of times people haven't even looked at those, right? And if you start looking to see that these are helpers, like the ruler of your north node, I like to think of as our diamond, our guardian angel, right? Trying to help us, to live more into that expression. And the South Node can also be there to help us, but are there times when this becomes a crutch or becomes a burden or something? And so we'll start to look at these, as characters that are alive, that are here to help us, as the gods that they are, that want something from us. And how can we work with them in more powerful ways?
Love that. And so if you're not interested in taking that much of an in-depth course on the nodes, you can always get a reading from someone like Christina or myself who have been trained in how to interpret the nodes. And, it does matter what, we look at kind of past life tendencies with the ruler of the South Node, with the ruler of the North Node. What are the aspects? Is there something that you didn't get in a previous life that, you know, part of your mission in this lifetime is to recapture that and reclaim it? And I know that once I understood my North and South Node journey better, and it is a lifetime's work. It doesn't, you know, it's not like you flip a switch and suddenly like you're doing your North Node. You know, you have to remember that you have to stretch yourself to do it, but it is your life's work. And the more that you can get into that part of your chart, the more you shine and the more that things begin to flow. Like when I remember my my driver's license says North 12, and that is because, and everyone's like, what does that mean? And it's because I need to constantly remind myself that my North Node is in the 12th house, and I do not need to be busy all the time. I need to just have faith and trust and believe that there is a kind universe. And so, you know, you can say these things all day long, but you have to actually live it and you have to believe it. And the more you can remind yourself when you get caught up in your South Node, the more that you can have a flowing life. You know, life, things start to like fall into place. Like that's what I also noticed is all of a sudden, like when you're doing your North Node, the universe kind of lines things up for you. And, you know, like you said, you don't have to come up against obstacles constantly. Like this is an opportunity where we can ground the energy and we can give you actual tools to move toward your soul's destiny. So that's why I think I love the GPS, your destiny's GPS. Like I'd never heard it called that. And I thought that was really clever. So
well, I remember the days. Do you remember the days when we had maps, right? Where we had to have a map for going anywhere. And my dad, bless him, he's in his 80s. He still likes to rely on maps. But you know, unless you're really good at looking at maps, that it could always be confusing. I know I would always be so frustrated by them. And then when GPS came out, you know, it's like it does a lot of the, you know, worry and confusion stuff for you. All you have to do is listen to where to go by like a very nice, friendly voice, and it kind of takes you by the hand turn by turn. And I feel like the lunar nodes, you know, the North Node, your North Node ruler, and also the transits of the nodes, they're there to help you with it. And like you said, Dabney, it's like you can get there's so much. You can look at your natal chart for lifetimes, but oftentimes it's good to just really focus, like cast your chart with just the lunar nodes. And once you've really deeply looked at them by house and sign, then maybe include the rulers, you know, of the North Node and South Node. But really, if you want to really find the GPS to destiny, just really focus on that as sort of a pure expression. Because for some people, it's not as easy. You know, they might not have good aspects with their lunar node. You know, maybe everything says, oh, you have all these, you know, stellium and Libra, you should do Libra. But then, you know, you have like your North Node in, I don't know, Leo or something like that. It's like, wait a second, that's not who I am. Well, maybe that's not who you know yourself to be or how you've conditioned to be, or what you're likely to do. You know, you could live a life and never really, you know, try to fulfill that North Node. But if you do look at it, then there's something there waiting for you that could really potentially be very fulfilling.
Yeah, and there's always ways to, if you work with an astrologer, that they can kind of see how you don't get a chart that doesn't belong to you, right? So here's the thing is like, I know, you know, you can have your North Node in Libra and your South Node in Aries. And so it's challenging for you to be in relationship. And then all the rest of your planets are in, you know, Capricorn and Aquarius, right? So like you said, like some people's chart, it's a lot harder work to get to that North Node place. But working with an astrologer, we can look at like, okay, where are the places where Capricorn energy actually aligns with Libra? Like, you know, even if it doesn't feel like a natural alignment, leading people in a compassionate way, with integrity. These are all things that bring you into relationship with other people, where you can kind of tap into your inner knowing and say like, oh yeah, I actually do want to be responsible to other people. So I think working with a really good astrologer who specializes in the nodes can then integrate the rest of your chart, even if it doesn't flow and it feels a little challenging. Because, like, I have a Virgo moon and a Gemini South node. Like, talk about a worry wart. Like, I'm the worrier of the family. I'm the one that's always like running around trying to help everyone, fussing. And I'm not supposed to do that. I'm supposed to be kicking back and letting the universe take care of me and let things come to me, like the queen I should be. But I have to work at it. But the more I understand that, the more I know when I'm out of alignment, and I can kind of realign myself, I guess, is just what I'm trying to say. So,
And what's interesting is when and like a whole nother other layer is what's happening in the skies. And like, so for instance, the ruler of your north node, as you know, is going to be coming up to your south node in Gemini. And that will also be an opportunity where likely doing more of that sort of south node Gemini can then lead to some of that north node, as the ruler. So like, and I mean, I have the ruler of my south node conjunct my north node. So I'm always like, they're definitely
you've
very
got the
much tied.
swapping, which we see a lot,
Yeah.
right? Isn't it amazing how much that energy, like what house it's in? Now we're geeking
Mhm.
out on astrology, but that's where it really
Mhm.
does get kind of complicated sometimes.
But
Untangling.
I think that's also where we don't want to make the South Node all bad, because sometimes, like you said, it can be gifts. And especially when you see that this is the time now, for you to be accepting of that and making the most out of it with an intention for that sort of growth and evolution to be seeded from, the work that your sixth house Gemini work that you're doing.
I love that. I'm gonna have to get another reading from Christina, because she's
Aw.
actually an incredibly talented astrologer. I was intrigued. She did in a Pluto and Aquarius special, kind of like mini readings, and she just has the most beautiful reports that she sends, and just she has a very soothing voice. So I can't recommend her enough. She's just brilliant, and like you can tell that it just comes very naturally to you. And that doesn't mean you haven't worked hard or studied hard, but you obviously just it kind of you can tell that it coalesces in a way that it is an expression of your soul. So
Thank
I'm
you.
grateful for your work, and I'm grateful that you've taken the time to come on my burgeoning channel and talk to me about the nodes and talk to everyone watching about the nodes. Anything else that you want to say? We'll put some links below in the comment section, but anything else that you'd like to close out with?
Yeah, it's just that my Lunar Nodes course, Mapping Destiny, the applied lunar nodes. So we're going to be applying what we learn to our own explorations of our charts. And so that begins June 1st, and you can sign up at radiantastrology.com. I do still have that free webinar that's also available until June 1st. And Dabney, I'll give you the link where people can access that. And just, thank you so much, Dabney. And when you are so effusive and so generous with, all of your praise, that's so Jupiter coming through. I was hearing all Jupiter.
Well, I mean it sincerely. And, I had that reading and I was like, wow, every astrologer has just their own way of doing things. And you find the astrologer that's right for you. Like that is like at the right time, the person that's going to say the thing that's going to really click and open up doors for you. It's all about trusting the universe. So, as I always say, there is a reason and a season for it all, and the universe is conspiring to help us. And so, thank you, Christina, for joining us. And check out our additional videos about the moon and the nodes and all sorts of stuff coming up. I've got a whole series about the moon and self care. So, check that out. So, all right, until next time, take care.